In today's video podcast, I want to answer one of my viewers' questions, which was sent to me a year ago after I posted a video about who should be your product owner on my YouTube channel. This question was from Dwi Purnamasari. After Dwi watched my video, she asked me to also make a video on who should be your Scrum Master to make it fair. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, Dwi, if you're listening to today's podcast, I just want to say sorry that I can get to answer your question now, which is a year later after you told me to make that video. This is because I have so many items in my backlog that I need to clear up. But thank you, Dwi, for your question. I really appreciate it. And folks, that means in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about who should be your Scrum Master. If you're interested, folks, stay tuned until the end of today's podcast. Hey, what's happening, awesome people? I hope you're having a great day when listening to today's podcast. Welcome back to my video podcast with your host here, Joshua Partugi. In my podcast, I will share with you practices that you can try to improve your company's state of agility. If agility is important for your company to stay competitive, stick around. Besides on my YouTube channel, today's podcast is also available on major podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So you can have a light bulb moment when you are in the midst of your routines. So buckle up for today's podcast. In today's podcast, I will share with you top 4 criteria to use when selecting a Scrum Master. I only came up with 4 criteria because I would like to keep it as simple as possible. As such, it doesn't overwhelm the decision makers or the recruiters when selecting a Scrum Master. The criteria I will elaborate here are mainly for selecting someone who already works inside a company but is currently not a Scrum Master. But I personally think these criteria can also be used when recruiting or hiring a Scrum Master from the job market. I also already made a video on my YouTube channel on top 5 questions you should ask when interviewing a Scrum Master from the job market. If you're interested in that, just go check it out on my YouTube channel. Okay, so before we dig into the 4 criteria, first and foremost, let's talk about what you should avoid doing. When selecting someone to be a Scrum Master, what you should avoid is just mapping people from the existing position in the company to Scrum Master. For example, what many companies out there are doing is just automatically converting all of their project managers, or sometimes technical leaders, to be the Scrum Master. I'm not saying that a project manager or a technical leader cannot be an awesome Scrum Master. What I'm trying to say here is some project managers or technical leaders may not really like or want to be a Scrum Master. They might have other aspirations for their careers, or they might like being in their current position. Sometimes you might find a hidden talent inside your company. They may not be a project manager nor a technical leader, and these people oftentimes will perform as a Scrum Master. To better explain my point here, I would like to share a story from my personal experience. A few years ago, I worked with a client who wanted to increase their state of agility, and one of the things they did was remove the project management office, or the PMO. At that time, inside the PMO, there were around 5 project managers. So my client asked me for advice. What should they do with these 5 project managers since the project manager position would no longer exist in the company? My client asked me, should all of the project managers in the company get converted to Scrum Masters? So at that time, I told my client, instead of automatically converting the project managers, the decision maker should have a one-to-one conversation with each of these project managers, because it's possible they do not want to be a Scrum Master. Maybe the project managers will feel that the characters needed to be a Scrum Master does not really fit with their character. I also told my client to explain to the project managers what other options that are still available in the company besides the Scrum Master. After the one-to-one conversation, interestingly, only 2 out of the 5 project managers who would like to try to become a Scrum Master, and they still stay in the company. The remaining 3 project managers said that they still like managing projects, they still like being in a position who has control. These 3 project managers left the company and find an opportunity to become a project manager at another company. And even more interesting, a few months later, this company found 2 persons from the customer support department and marketing department who are interested to become a Scrum Master, and they really perform at their job. The point I'm trying to say here is do not just automatically convert people to be a Scrum Master. Have a one to one conversation and also give options to people so people don't feel trapped. By doing this, we are demonstrating humility. We're also respecting their career aspirations. We are respecting them as human beings rather than just viewing them as fungible resources. And as you already know, respect is one of the Scrum values. And secondly, folks, do not automatically appoint someone to be a Scrum Master just because he or she is certified as a Scrum Master. Based on my experience interviewing hundreds of Scrum Masters from the job market, the majority of people can get the Scrum Master certification, but not everyone has the character needed to be an awesome Scrum Master. It also doesn't mean you should immediately neglect people from your company who are already Scrum Master certified to be the Scrum Master. It's quite possible those people who are already certified as a Scrum Master have the character needed to be an awesome Scrum Master. What I'm trying to say here is when choosing a Scrum Master, first and foremost, look into the person's character. Certification should be the last criteria. All right, so let's get into the 4 criteria we should use when selecting a Scrum Master from within our company. The Scrum Master is going to interact with many different people in the company. A lot. When you read the Scrum Guide, not only the Scrum Master needs to serve the Scrum team, the Scrum Master also needs to serve the wider organization, or in other words, basically the whole company. Sometimes the Scrum Master may need to interact with people from audit, or people from finance, or people from procurement department, or people from governance, risk, marketing, well, basically everyone in the company. Sometimes the Scrum Master needs to interact with the senior management too. From here, we can say that the first criteria for selecting a Scrum Master is people oriented and a great communicator. That means the appointed Scrum Master must like investing a lot of time with people. Yes, all of us interact with people in the workplace, but not everyone likes to invest time to actively listen to people. Some people are strategy and numbers oriented. These people do not really have any interest on how people achieve the number. Some people are task oriented. They just want to get things done without spending too much time with people. The point is, not everyone in our company is people oriented. And there is nothing wrong with that. Everyone is different. The appointed Scrum Master must enjoy being in the presence amongst people. And these people may show some resistance for change. These people may not have the behaviors that are aligned with the Scrum values. And folks, I've made several videos about behaviors that align with the Scrum values in my YouTube channel. You can just find Scrum Values playlist on my YouTube channel, and you can just watch the videos inside that playlist. As a people-oriented person, the Scrum Master must be someone patient. Yes, patience is key to be an effective Scrum Master. The Scrum Master must be patient to see people change and also patient to see changes happen in the company. The Scrum Master cannot be someone who just wants to rush into something, just want things to happen really fast. A change of behavior that will make the company's state of agility improve, it doesn't happen overnight. The Scrum Master must also be patient when listening to people, because sometimes the conversation the Scrum Master will be having with these people, it can be quite long from my personal experience. If the Scrum Master does not have any patience, he or she may not be effective in influencing people's behavior that drives change inside the company. As the Scrum Master is mostly going to invest his or her time with people, the Scrum Master must be compassionate towards people. Someone who is not compassionate may not be an effective Scrum Master. The Scrum Master must not be judgmental towards people. The Scrum Master should not impose his or her own thought process to someone else. The Scrum Master must instead be curious, apply the beginner's mind when observing people's behavior. One of the main activities of a Scrum Master as written on Scrum Guide is teaching. Not only teaching the Scrum team, but also others in the company. You can just read it in the Scrum Guide. Other departments like finance, marketing, audit, governance, risk, procurement, they also need to be taught by the Scrum Master about what it takes to improve the company's state of agility. Therefore, the second criteria for selecting a Scrum Master is great teaching skills. Anybody can teach, but not everybody is a great teacher. Someone who knows a lot may not necessarily be a great teacher, too. There are many university professors who are not necessarily a great teacher. A great teacher is not only able to make people understand what's being taught, but they're also engaging. They're able to make people enjoy the learning process and able to make people hungry to learn for more. As a teacher, the Scrum Master must also understand that every individual is different. Every individual learns differently. Every individual learning speed is different. Some people learn faster than the other. Every individual approaches problems differently. Sometimes the Scrum Master may need to teach using a customized approach according to each individual's learning style and learning speed. A great teacher is also not defensive with what he or she knows. Therefore, I personally think a Scrum Master must not be someone who is defensive with what he or she knows. Someone who thinks that he or she has the universal truth to all problems in this universe is definitely not a good candidate to be the Scrum Master. And yes, I've met those kind of people several times during my career. One of the Scrum values is openness. Not only the Scrum Master is a great teacher, the Scrum Master must also be open to learn from others in the company. Someone who has a high ego might not be willing to learn from others. To influence people to learn continuously, the Scrum Master must be someone who is curious and someone who really likes learning. Continuous learning culture in the company may be influenced by the Scrum Master, and that's why this character is very important. The Scrum Master training should not be the last place for the Scrum Master to learn. In fact, it's only just the beginning. Now, another main activity that the Scrum Master does, as written on Scrum Guide, is facilitating. Therefore, the third criteria for selecting a Scrum Master is great at facilitation. Yes, there are hidden talents inside your company. There are people inside your company who are great at facilitating. You just need to look around throughout your company. Sometimes they may be from other departments. There will be individuals in your company who naturally are able to engage and unite people towards a common purpose. The Scrum Master must be someone who is creative and can think outside of the box. The Scrum Master must be creative in designing the structure of a facilitated event or a meeting, and also creative in getting people engaged in these facilitated events or meetings. A lot of people in our company find meetings are not engaging, hence wasting their time. Now, the Scrum Master should be someone who is able to change that situation. As a facilitator, the Scrum Master must also be able to dance in the moment. Sometimes the Scrum Master must be ready to pivot from the facilitation structure that he or she has already prepared. Therefore, the appointed Scrum Master must be someone who is dynamic and not someone who is rigid. And lastly, folks, according to Scrum Guide, the Scrum Master is a true leader who serves. I personally think this is a very important point that many companies out there missed. The last criteria for selecting a Scrum Master is a true leader. That means the Scrum Master must be someone who can lead without using authority, without force, or without using any power. Someone who has the aspiration to have authority or to have control over people in their career plan, they're definitely not a good candidate to be the Scrum Master. And yes, I have met many people during job interviews who explicitly told me that their long-term career plan is to have many subordinates who will work for them and whom they can tell what to do. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone have their own career aspirations. But these people are not a good candidate to be the Scrum Master. There is also a misconception in the market that the Scrum Master is the developer's best friend, who exists to protect the developers from outside interference. Now, sometimes leaders may do something that is not popular because leaders looking at the greater good of the whole company. When the Scrum Master acts as the best friend for the developers, it may downgrade the quality of his or her leadership, and sometimes it may break the trust from people outside of the Scrum team. As a leader, the appointed Scrum Master must be someone who has integrity, not the ones who are easily swayed around. That individual must have the courage to say it like it is without sugarcoating anything, just to make the decision makers hear what they want to hear. Besides integrity, as a true leader, the Scrum Master must also be someone who is respected in the company. This individual is respected not because he or she has authority or power in the company, but because he or she is inspiring. People are inspired by the way the Scrum Master leads. The Scrum Master inspires people. The Scrum Master is a humble leader. So let's wrap up today's podcast, folks. Here are the top 4 criteria you should use when selecting a Scrum Master from inside your company. Firstly, people oriented and great communicator. Secondly, great teaching skills. Thirdly, great at facilitation. And fourthly, a true leader. Remember, folks, focus on the character rather than just mapping the job titles and rather than just focusing on certification. So, those are what I personally think are the top 4 criteria you should use when selecting someone in your company to be the Scrum Master. Now, I didn't put Scrum knowledge or any other technical knowledge or domain knowledge as the prerequisite or as the criteria for selecting a Scrum Master. I have worked with so many awesome Scrum Masters who started their journey without any prior Scrum knowledge or without any technical or domain knowledge, and they still perform as a Scrum Master. Yes, I do understand. Ideally, a Scrum Master should have a prior knowledge in Scrum. That's why they call the Scrum Master. And yes, I do understand. Ideally, companies hire an experienced Scrum Master from the job market. But we also have to understand that not every company is in an ideal situation. I personally think the Scrum theories, also with the other agile practices or technical practices that the Scrum Master need to teach for the Scrum team or the organization, this knowledge can be learned by the Scrum Master through training. When the seed is planted on the right soil, the individual will thrive as a Scrum Master. And also from my experience, oftentimes after the decision makers have selected the Scrum Master, that individual was sent to a Scrum Master training, or that individual was paired with a mentor, either a mentor from the company or a mentor from outside of the company. So that is why I didn't put Scrum or technical knowledge or domain knowledge as one of the criteria or prerequisite for selecting a Scrum Master from inside a company. Any other knowledge that the Scrum Master needs to know, like product management or coaching, and these knowledge can also be learned by the Scrum Master through training. The Scrum Master can attend product management training or coaching training that is available in the market. In today's podcast, I want to emphasize that character is the most important criteria for selecting a Scrum Master above everything else. So, what do you think, folks? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Have I mentioned all of the most important criteria needed when selecting someone inside the company to be the Scrum Master? Have I missed any other criteria? You can let me know by leaving a comment in the comment section below if you're watching today's podcast on YouTube, or you can just tag me on Twitter using handle name @jpartogi. Hopefully today's podcast is helpful for you to identify who in your company should be the Scrum Master. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day. Until my next podcast, don't forget to stay awesome.